Hi, everybody. This is one of those moments like, how's everybody doing tonight? Yeah, fantastic. Fantastic. Hi, Sam. How you doing, buddy? Good, doing well. All right. Um, so we're going back to an old segment that we used to do here at Keystone Sessions called Founder Stories, and it's part of a series that we're going to be running in 2025. It's part of the Disruption Lab series that we're doing. And the point of Founder Stories is really how do you get founders up here to talk about kind of their origin story, what got them into entrepreneurship. Let's talk about the businesses that they're building, the things that they're doing today, and what can we take away from that. And then also, so many of the entrepreneurs that we run across, this isn't the first time they've done this. Usually, you'll see serial entrepreneurs, and how do you take the lessons that serial entrepreneurs have encountered in their various experiences and be able to impart those to those who are trying it for the first time. I've always found it's so much easier to learn from people who've already done it. Like, you don't have to make the same mistakes that others have made. Try to learn from them as much as you can. That's really what this series is all about. And this is, I've known Tim for, oh my gosh,
Don't say it.
yeah, it's been a while. It's been a hot minute. That I've known Tim in his previous role, and part of the Kansas City ecosystem back when the Kansas City ecosystem, I like to say, was reborn back in the Google Fiber days. I used to believe it was the first, like it was, oh, this ecosystem is emerging in Kansas City, and came to learn that Kansas City's history is deep, deep in entrepreneurship, and that was just kind of a rebirth moment. And I've known this man since then. So Tim Sylvester is the CEO of PaynPoint,
Yes.
a serial entrepreneur, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Actually, let's just start there. When was your first startup? When was your first, entrepreneurial endeavor?
Well, there's two ways to look at that. The first time I ever made money was selling a pig at a 4-H auction. I made $364. Um, Farming is a very entrepreneurial and old activity, but the first startup that I had was actually selling custom burned CDs in high school. I got a copy of Rolling Stone and looked at the Billboard Top 100 in the back. And then I went on Usenet and downloaded MP3s for all the top 100 songs. And then took a list to school and said $1 per CD plus $1 per track, as many as you like, and just brought home a stack of orders and a stack of money.
That's so funny. I was a subscriber. I'm gonna date myself. If there was an old magazine that came out called College Music Journal, and it was a monthly subscription, and in the back of it, it had a CD with all like the new songs that were coming out.
Oh, yeah.
And I love that to death. So I would have been a loyal customer back then for sure.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and then my mom found it. She found all the money, and she freaked out of it about me going to jail and shut me down.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
All right. So, but that didn't dampen your spirits for entrepreneurship.
It just motivated me
Sure.
once I realized how easy it was to, like, get people to give you money if you had something they wanted.
That's the key right there. That's the whole point. It's got to be something that somebody wants.
That's right, yes.
So, all right. So, was selling, pirating. Well, I don't know if we should use that word, but pirating CDs was your first real entrepreneurial endeavor, and then from there, like, we're just like, I. g- when did you get into the big startup, the startup that you'd worked on? When I first met you.
Yeah, so, I actually, I always wanted to do bigger and better things, and, I went to a rural high school, so didn't have a great education, didn't have the opportunity with, like, um, the kids that were here today had, and so I actually went back to college after dropping out the first time in order to get an engineering degree so that I had the credibility to do more interesting things. And so I went back, I saw the global financial crisis, the storm brewing on the horizon. And when there's going to be a terrible economic disruption, go into education. There's funding for it, there's support. You come out better person, and you can just weather the storm. So I went back to college, I got my engineering degree. I graduated as an electrical and computer engineer in 2012 and then immediately started Integrated Roadways.
Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about integrated roadways. So, What was give us the elevator pitch on integrated roadways.
Yeah, so Integrated Roadways was digital transformation of public infrastructure for connected electric and autonomous vehicles, basically turning the road into a data and communications network in order to support the next generation of vehicles.
And so this was something you picked up in school, like as a potential opportunity. Where was the connection between what you were doing and what you were learning about from an engineering perspective, and then wanting to pursue this? Because I will say, I've run into a lot of passionate entrepreneurs, a lot of people who um, will die on that hill of kind of what they're doing. And you are at the top of that list, man. Tim, you were the greatest advocate and the greatest salesperson for the future of transportation technology that I had met at the time, by far. And so, what created that passion for you? What was that jump to integrated roadways?
Well, I've always been way ahead of the curve on technology. I grew up on the internet before the internet was what we had now, right? I grew up on dial-up bulletin board services. And Kevin, what I saw was that the road building industry had been frozen in time for 100 years, and that we needed a better means and method to build roads. Everything's made in a factory. Can you show me one thing here that was refined in a factory somehow? And yet roads are all built manually. So I said, well, why don't we build roads in the factory? And while we're doing that, we put technology in them in order to enable the next generation of vehicles. As it turns out, it's a lot harder than that.
Sure, sure.
But I originally had the idea as a teenager, and I was like, let's just make a road into a Lego kit, and all the pieces come out on the back of a truck, and we put it together. And so I ended up getting 60 patents in that area, and we built a bunch of demos. We proved all the technology works. And then we epically flamed out whenever our Series A financier got clobbered with the interest rate increases a couple of years ago. And so we went from raising a $50 million Series A to starting over.
It's such a capital intensive space, obviously, especially doing it the way you wanted to do it. Run us really quickly through the vision of how, like, because this was always fascinating to me. Well, the benefits of having smart pavement, of having smart roadway. You highlighted a few of them when you kind of did the elevator pitch, but talk about how it worked.
Yeah. Well, look, roads are a public subsidy, and they're a public subsidy that costs us trillions of dollars. More than half of roads in the United States need complete replacement. We only have the budget annually for a tiny fraction of improvements that we require. For example, Kansas City has 6,000 miles of roadway, but we only have the budget to service 200 miles a year. That means 30 years on average in order to get out to a piece of road and fix it.
Will they keep doing the same 200 miles between my work and here?
Yes,
My home
exactly.
every year too.
Exactly. And it's not just a Kansas City problem, it's a universal problem.
Okay.
And the reason, in my opinion, is because the market is purely a public subsidy. So there's little, if any, incentive to improve, to do a better job. And the embedded players just keep getting the same jobs and the same contracts over and over and over again. So I said, look, what if the road pays for its own existence based on the services it provides? Data is money, communications, networking, wireless charging, all of these advanced features we could deliver through the road would not only pay for the road, but make the road profitable enough that the network could expand and expand and expand and eventually push out all of this public subsidy. Well, Kansas City spends 75 million a year on roadways. What else could we spend that 75 million a year on if the road paid for itself? Now, it all makes a lot of sense, but it's super capital intensive. And I realize maybe too late that there were a lot of forces that are very adamant that things stay just as they are.
Sure, sure. You go back to the Tom Pendergast days here in Kansas City. That concrete business is a lucrative business for someone.
It very much is, and I actually have, like, a giant essay called, "From Concrete Roads to Atom Bombs" that explains how the invention of concrete roads in Kansas City eventually led to the bombing in Japan. That's on my personal website, you can look up on your own time.
All right, gonna have to go check that out for sure. That's fascinating. So as Integrated Roadways was winding down, as you were going through the wind down of that process, I can only imagine that there was maybe I the trepidation of jumping back in. Was it I need to go do something different? Because what you're doing now with PaynPoint is, I mean, it's not related to,
Right,
and we'll talk
yeah.
about that in a second. But walk me through the mindset of coming out of 16 years.
Well, I mean, technically from like a business filing standpoint, but more like 10 from an
Okay.
actual activity standpoint, because I had that college stint in there.
So coming out of 10 years of leading that and doing some incredible work, the pilot work that you'd done, the investment that you'd raised, and so on. What was your mindset like in wanting to like start a new one? Were you want to dive back into it, or was it kind of wait to hold on a second?
Well, I mean, it was a dark and challenging time, right? That is a tough thing to spend a quarter of your life on something and then just have it kind of blow away in the wind overnight. But I'm not the only one. There's so many people that have been through that. And look, if it's between losing a 10-year business and a 10-year-old child, like I'd lose the 10-year-old business any day. But one of my friends, he went through something similar a few years before me. And I asked him, "What are you going to do now?" And he says, "I'm going to do the same thing I was doing before, better, faster, cheaper, half the time, half the money, twice the output." And I spoke to him a few months ago and he said, "We make more money every month than my last business made in its entire existence."
Yeah. I think that's the benefit of this idea of being a serial entrepreneur is, you can like compound interest, like you can continue to kind of build on it, but the acceleration is
Right.
so much greater.
Yes. And, they say make all of your biggest mistakes in your first marriage and your first startup. So that wasn't my first startup,
I could check both those
but
boxes. That's pretty cool. Yeah, yeah. Fantastic. So all right, let's jump into the pain point conversation then. So um tell us a little bit about what you're doing now. Give us the spiel on what is pain point.
well, so I spent a decade in advanced infrastructure to collect traffic data, and I decided that I needed to do something completely different. So I started PaynPoint to deliver advanced infrastructure to collect traffic data. And what I realized was that half of the traffic on the internet is from automated agents, bots. And yet your average website cannot see bots because analytics ignore them and filter them out. uh, you can't control bots because there's no way to actually there's no simple way for your website to change the way that it behaves based on whether it's a human or a bot that it's interacting with. And then finally, and this is the biggest one, there's no way to make money on bots. What's that mean? It means that your website is subsidizing a growing amount of traffic, bots, from a shrinking amount of traffic, humans. So you have to make more money off of a smaller audience, higher cost. That is a death spiral. And that is why Reddit went to a paid API. That's why Twitter went to a paid API. Twitch struggles with this. Every website is spending half of their operating costs on non-productive traffic. So I thought, you know what? Let's let's build something so that we can see the bots, control the bots, and convert the bots to revenue. So that's what we're doing with Paint.
Fantastic. So what was the first step for you in this new journey?
Uh to go back to school again,
Okay.
just like last time. Because I'm an electrical and computer engineer, but I was doing large system integration, pre-built things, gluing them together like a Lego kit. Um, but I felt the urge to actually build this myself, which meant that I needed to learn software development. And my engineering program taught me, C, C++, assembly. I learned some HTML, some CSS, but I knew that I didn't know how to build an advanced modern web app. And so the first thing that I did was spend hundreds of hours learning JavaScript, TypeScript, Next.js, React, and a dozen others to actually be credible as a software developer.
I love the builders. I mean, I think the most powerful entrepreneurs are the builders, builder entrepreneurs. I think there's been a lot of research and studies on that. But I'm always fascinated to learn from those who are self-taught. How?
Well, I mean, honestly, the most powerful tool that I used was Code Academy,
Okay.
and I just put up like $220 and just started blowing through their programs.
Yep.
And the more of their they provide interactive coding tutorials, right? So like they walk you through exactly how to whatever it is they're trying to teach. Um, and the more of those that I completed, the more time I spent building the actual app that I wanted to build. And then I spoke to another entrepreneur, and he was like, "What are you doing with AI?" And I'm like, "Well, we're building an app to like deal with it." And he's like, "No, no, no. How are you using AI?"
Right, right.
And so he showed me that I could take the skills that I had, rudimentary and developing as they were, and basically feed what I was building into Anthropic's Claude.ai, and it would spit out these massive reams of extremely broken code, but so much faster than I could possibly do on my own. And so then I could switch from like, how the heck do I do this to how the heck do I fix this, which is a lot faster. Well, most
I
of
was
the
gonna say, I don't know if that's all always true.
time.
But yeah.
Not always true.
No, no, I got it. So how long? What was the window? All right, so you knew the problem you wanted to solve
Mhm,
before you went and educated yourself
mhm,
on building it.
mhm.
Okay. Um, how long was this period of time where you were kind of understanding and learning how you were gonna actually build this platform
Yeah.
for this?
Well, so I made a clear commitment in about I'm sorry, January of last year, and spent the next 2 or 3 months, working on my development skills.
Just 24, 23,
This was 24.
24. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So, like, this all literally happened this year. Um, so I spent a few months, just studying on development skills and then got to the point where by June, um, my buddy, Jace, the same one I was talking about earlier, yeah, he issued me a challenge and he's like, "Tim, if you don't have it done by September, you're not gonna do it." And I'm like, "Okay, challenge accepted." And so I had a working demo working on my machine in June. And I went out and recruited a co-founder. And by August, we had made a commitment to deliver. Um, and he looked at what I was doing and he's like, "Buddy, like, you're halfway there, but you're only halfway there." So we stripped it down and rebuilt the entire thing again.
Why co-founder?
Largely because you can't really do anything yourself, right? Everything we want to do, we're relying on other people, whether we like it or not, whether we acknowledge it or not. And the integrated roadways was so unorthodox. It was so out of the box, and it made everything 10 times harder than it needed to be. And I said, you know what? I'm too old and worn out to fight an uphill battle every single day, so I'm just going to go with the flow. I'm going to do what everybody expects. And I'm going to focus on um, startup and entrepreneurship standard models. And one of those is just Y Combinator. Just do what Y Combinator says. Are you guaranteed to be successful? No. Are you more likely to be successful? Yes, because they've seen it tens of thousands of times and they know what is not going to work. So I followed the Y Combinator Startup School, which is just, startupschool.org, I think.
Yeah.
And one of the things that they say is you must have a co-founder. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. You must have a co-founder.
I tell founders all the time that that is one of the top success criteria or uh, measurements of if you're going to be successful or not, is if you're a co-founder. When we look at application interviews, that's one of the things that we don't exclude solo founders, but we certainly will score co-founded teams much higher for that very reason. You get that balance
Mhm.
and that shared responsibility, and also that accountability.
The accountability is very important.
Talk a little bit about that. How is that? When did you realize how important the accountability factor of that was?
You know, like, you have to answer to somebody. And as an entrepreneur, you can get the idea that you answer to nobody but yourself, which is never true unless you want to be like really unsuccessful and then go ahead. But you just everybody needs someone that they can talk to about what they're doing, that has different strengths and weaknesses, that has areas of understanding that are beyond your own, right? So like um, one of the first things that Wes did whenever we started working together was he was like, "Man, you have a gem of a concept, an approach, a business model." But he says the coding approach you're taking, the structure of this web app is never going to work. And so we completely redid it. And you know what? I'm glad we did. And I never would have if I hadn't recruited somebody that was strong in places that I'm weak that could tell me, nah, there's a way better way.
So you just said something that I think is really valuable and interesting. You taught yourself to be a builder to the a builder entrepreneur, a builder founder. But then when you went and got a co-founder, you went and got someone that had that skill. Talk a little bit about that decision versus going and getting somebody else maybe that might be completely complementary and you stayed to build.
Yeah, I mean, look, I do all right, but I'm not the best there is, and I know it. And being aware of your own weaknesses and your own challenges is incredibly important. Um, and you know, oh, I had a train of thought there that I was aiming at, but yeah, anybody can learn to sell. Selling is really just the art of convincing people to do what you want, which most people can get there. Um, but the getting a technical founder is I wish I had kept that train of thought because it felt very powerful, but it
We'll come
slipped
back.
away from me. We'll come back to
Yeah,
it.
we could absolutely come back.
Yeah, let's revisit because as soon as we change topics, I'm gonna remember exactly what I wanted to say.
Fantastic. So you get to the point you've got a co-founder, you guys redo the stack. Um, what did customer validation look like for you? Like how did you go out? I see so many founders like this is the greatest idea. This is the best mousetrap ever. I'm going to build this thing. I need to go raise money. Hold on. Like, have you talked to any clients? Have you talked to any customers? So what would a customer validation look like for you?
Yeah, well, the last time that I started a company, it was, more than 10 years before, and the entire financing process was super different at the time. And so I spoke to entrepreneurs that had raised money more recently. And what they all said was, trust me, bro, money is gone. You have to do customer centric development. You have to have an MVP, and you probably need people paying you before you can raise any investment capital. And I'm like, man, that sucks because I just wanted people to start writing checks again like they used to. But what I always look for is what do people complain about, and are they willing to pay to solve that pain? And is the amount they're willing to pay enough to make it worth your time to try to help them? Okay. And so what I saw was that um, countless news stories about newspapers suing AI companies for content scraping. And then AI companies doing deals with user generated content websites to get the content. I said, okay, People are complaining. They're putting a lot of money against it. And I went out and started trying to talk to newspapers, publishers about whether or not they would use software tools. And what I discovered is that they are naked and afraid and like 10 layers deep in an organization. They're so overstressed that they won't talk to anybody. And the few conversations that I had, not nearly enough, were them basically saying, if you can help solve this, we will pay for it and so will everyone else. And like I was spending so much time trying to get to that first conversation. And every time I finally got it, they were like, oh God, please help us. And I was like, well, when I may have wanted 100 and gotten, 60, 70 positive answers out of 100. But when I got to like a dozen and it was like 12 for 12 and they're like, we're drowning here, I'm like, if I don't have something to sell them, like I can't help them.
Yeah,
So
there's
now
a
it's
there
time.
there for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what's the there look like? So what does an integration look like? What is it, what is the product?
Yeah. Well, and this is one of the things that Wes did really well because my concept was, well, we'll build an application element that they'll put on their own website. And, we'll build it as like a Docker container and they can just, install it locally. And he's like, dude, you're asking way too much. Like, if it's not up and running in 5 minutes, they need more than one technical person for half an hour. Like, you're not going to get it. Okay. Maybe later when you're proven. And so he tore it down and turned it into a tracking pixel for the initial analytics, a cloud deployed content delivery network skeleton to intercept the traffic and then have the compute and store to actually modify the responses. And basically, now all you have to do to turn on our system is one line of DNS changes so that all of your traffic goes through our CDN. And then we interpret the request flow of your traffic against a set of rules. And then the rules tell the middleware what to do with that traffic. Do we bounce it? Do we modify it? Do we pass it on? And I'll tell you, like, getting people onboarded by themselves with no assistance in 5 minutes,
Yeah,
like, that's the way to go.
it's magic.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. So where are you guys at in the process right now?
Well, we had our public launch yesterday.
Hey, congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Fantastic.
The reality though, then, and for a B2B software company, like a public launch is just it's something you have to do.
Yeah,
Um,
we all clap.
yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Launches are really more important for B2C, right? Like, hey, go buy my Um, but, you get out there, you make some noise, you tell people, hey, this is actually available. And now when you go out to clients, it's like, yes, it really is available. And it's just, it's a legitimizing element. And like most things, that help legitimize, like it's often quite thin. But you get the first clients and you just build up from that. And it's honestly, Kevin, it's all about, communication of what you're doing, being open with it, telling them where you are, and then finding people that will meet you exactly where you are.
So I'm gonna ask you, I like to ask entrepreneurs this question, especially when they're maybe applying to be in an accelerator program or some, mentoring program that will or something. But why won't this work? Have you done the due diligence and the self-awareness check of like why won't this work? And am I really thinking hard about why somebody's gonna stop me or why this is gonna work?
Yeah. Well, the biggest obstacle that I see right now is that everyone has considered bots like a nuisance byproduct, and they don't really think of bots in their marketing and advertising strategy. They filter out the bots because they want to get to the
Waste.
humans.
They want to get rid of it.
It's a
Yeah,
waste,
yeah.
exactly. And so I talk to people in digital marketing and SEO, and I'm like, "How are bots a part of your ad strategy?" And they're like, "We get rid of them. We don't want them."
Right.
Okay, that's fair. And it can be difficult to actually get that conversation going because you say, "Well, what if we actually did take a look at the bots? And they're like, well, we don't do any of that. But garbage becomes raw material all the time, everywhere. And so, really, like, the biggest obstacle is just having the right conversations with the right people so that they can understand what we're actually doing. And we also have a competitor that's raised like $30 million and already have a host of paying customers. And that scares a lot of people. But competition proves that there is demand in the market. And the fact that they've already raised a lot of money proves that there are people that are willing to finance the development of something to actually attack that market opportunity.
Who doesn't want to see this level of transparency that's out there right now?
Well, um, right now, there are a lot of crawlers and content scrapers that are basically uh, pulling data from websites, packaging it into gray marketplaces, and then selling that data to the AI training companies. And it's kind of like a pawn shop full of stolen goods where the cops show up and the shopkeeper is like, well, I didn't know it was stolen. Like, okay. So the existing training market is basically I'm going to scrape it myself and take the legal liability for that, or I'm going to go buy it from somebody and pretend like I had no idea. So, it hasn't really been a big deal until publishers started suing people about a year, 18 months ago.
Now, the big ad networks are still monetizing that bot traffic, though they're still monetizing it, right? Because they're monetizing based on the
Like
number of
click
views, the
throughs.
click throughs, the number of views, those types of things.
So a lot of ad networks actually filter out bot traffic from their payment method
Okay.
because they know that the person paying for the ads doesn't want to pay for an ad to be fed through to the bot. And so they don't want to bite the hand that feeds them,
Hmm.
which means that when a bot visits your website, you're not getting paid by your ad network because your ad network knows that it's a bot, but that information does not get pushed through to the website itself. And this was actually one of my key questions. If the ad network is killing the ad serve, why isn't it telling
Right.
the website to kill the page serve? Well, that's not their problem.
Interesting. Interesting. So, what do you see as like what's next for where you guys are at? So you did the public launch yesterday,
Mhm.
and so now it's like let's just get this in market. Let's get this out there as much as possible.
Yeah. And what's next is robots.next. That's the name of our product. So thank you for that setup. Um,
What I'm here for.
yeah, what's next really is Kansas City is a huge digital marketing and SEO epicenter. We have a lot of web development shops. We have major, major marketing and advertising firms like VMLYR, right? And so what's next for us is really communication with that ideal client profile and helping them understand that they're running services, they're managed service providers running services for hundreds, sometimes thousands of websites. And they can become channel partners for us, reselling our software into their existing service chain. They can reduce the cost of running the website for their client. They can manage the website better, more profitably, and they can convert part of it into new revenues. We don't have the bot paywall features turned on yet. Those are coming soon. But agencies rely on fees, and usually these are fixed contracts. So if we can show them you're going to spend less, you're going to have more control, and you're going to make more money, well, that's a win for basically all of their clients.
And then the yeah the revenue side as you turn that on is like the kind of icing on the cake. Move down that.
Exactly. And if we can, like, we know that our competitors are already doing this. Thank them for, blazing the trail for us. But yeah, the ability to convert even a fraction of bot traffic into new revenue. Look, my point of view is Web 1 was ads and e-commerce, and that gave us Google and Amazon. Web 2 was B2B SaaS and B2C SaaS, and that gave us Salesforce and Netflix and every other streaming site. Web 3 is AI and crypto. But where's the revenue model for AI and crypto? Is it just more SaaS, more e-commerce, more ads? Well, revenue in crypto, I'm sorry, AI and crypto. AI creates a lot of bots, and crypto makes transactions easy. So let's give those bots wallets. Let's give the websites the ability to demand payment. Let's turn the internet into pay per view for bots and just say, hey, look, we'll give you what you want, but you have to pay us for it. Isn't that how literally everything works?
It'll be interesting to see, yes, and it will be interesting to see what happens to the bot ecosystem. I can see this being a suppression, like this being a force that starts to reduce. I mean, because it's not free. That
Exactly.
extraction is not free anymore. So it'll be interesting to see what happens as this continues to grow as a marketplace. I want to shift in our remaining time,
Mhm.
Tim. Anything else you want to say about PaynPoint?
Well, I wanted to emphatically agree with the change in the bot environment when they have to pay. Because right now you go on Twitter, you go on Facebook, you go on Reddit, you go on Amazon, they are overwhelmed with bots because the cost is essentially non-existent. But if they have to pay, the entire game changes.
Yeah, for sure. It'll be interesting to see how that evolves over the coming years as this continues to grow as an opportunity. I want to shift gears a little bit in our remaining time and talk more. I want to go back to the entrepreneurship thing. So now that we've kind of framed, you started as a kid. This was a young kind of thing that you were in. You've done a deep capital intensive, long term, kind of startup that you grew, and now you're back at it again. What's the hardest thing about being an entrepreneur, in your opinion?
All of my personal life that I sacrificed for a business that ended up dying.
Just gonna let that sit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Think that through, people, really. Because you'll have a lot of extremely wealthy, extremely successful people that came from privileged backgrounds that will say, you got to work 80 hours a week. You got to work every day of the week. You got to sacrifice everything for this startup. But they're benefiting from everything that you give up. Okay. What do you get out? Seriously, what do you get out of it? Older and fatter and tired? I mean, yeah, you make a lot of money that way, right? I get it. But the reality is the quality of your work product falls off a cliff after 50 hours. After 60 hours, you may as well not even be working 40 hours. When are you going to have time to eat correctly so that you feel well? Are you sleeping enough? Are you exercising so that you actually have energy? What about spending your life with someone? What about having a family or an important relationship? What does that cost? What would you pay for that? So keep in mind when somebody gives you advice, why are they telling you this? And how do they benefit from what you're giving up?
So now I want to flip that with that context and the idea that you sacrificed and gave up so much. Why are you doing it again? What is it about being? What is the good part about being an entrepreneur?
I love it. Every minute of it. Even the terrible parts are amazing. Um, it's so much fun. It's so much excitement. I have learned so much. And like, you remember Calvin and Hobbes, where every time Calvin's dad wanted Calvin to do something he didn't like, he'd say it builds character. It builds character. And like, um, I don't mind being told what to do. Actually, I kind of like it as long as whoever's telling me knows what they're talking about. But I always had a problem with my bosses that eventually I would start to see the areas that they were weak in, and then they didn't like my feedback.
Yeah.
And I wanted more control over my time. And as an entrepreneur, you really do have a lot of control over your time. Do you exert that control? Well, that's up to you. But you have it more so than when you must be in the parking lot at this time of day or whatever it might be. But really, Kevin, I love it. I have gone around the world. I've spent weeks or months in amazing cities all over the place, no cost out of my pocket. Um, I've met incredible people, made lifelong friendships, and I am constantly challenged to be better.
Yeah. Um, being a startup in Kansas City, having been in these other places, having raised money, in these other like what's your take on being a innovation led, high growth founder in Kansas City?
Kansas City has three extremely important things going for it. We are so cheap. The quality of life here is incredible. And the average income compared to the cost of living and quality of life is really good. So, like from a financial standpoint, it's hard to get a better place than Kansas City. You're 4 hours on Southwest, which is usually one of the cheapest yet still reasonable airline. 4 hours to New York, 4 hours to San Francisco, um, direct flights to Cozumel. Uh,
It's a
but
great market for startups. It's a great market.
great location to live, but every benefit has drawbacks. And the financing market for startups in Kansas City needs work. The amount of evidence and expectation that people have for making an investment compared to the amount that they'll put in is astonishing. Like I've raised money here um, and got the best deal I possibly could, and then gone out to San Francisco, and they're like, "Why would you ever take that deal?"
Right.
I'm like, "Well, because they had earnest money when I needed it, and I didn't know you yet."
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think as that model flips, I think as that model continues to change and we start to see the VC mindset continue to evolve, I'll call it,
Mhm.
you start to see founder education increase around, hey, really only 1% of you should or need to raise venture capital.
Mhm.
I think that'll also be, I mean, I think we're getting into an interesting time as it relates to institutional capital. And I believe that that flip benefits a market like this where you do have a longer run.
Mm.
Like those financial benefits, those talent benefits, some of those other things, remote work now, like where do you want to live? Granted, we don't have mountain things, but um, we do have a lot of other really strong benefits. So I'm bullish on Kansas City as a startup market, in spite of the headwinds we've faced from a financing perspective.
Absolutely.
Because I think those things are starting to kind of self correct as well for early stage founders. Tim, a couple things. One, thank you for coming up here and sharing your story with us. I appreciate that. Two, thanks for doing what you're doing here in Kansas City. I think you've been a tremendous asset in the ecosystem here, in short amount of time that we've known each other. Um, and I'm excited to see kind of this new. It's very different than what you were doing. I did not make the connection of you're still collecting traffic data and monetizing that. That's pretty cool that you've made that connection. But I would love to have you back to talk about kind of where you guys are at as you go down the road and kind of that progress.
No pun intended. Right?
Yes, yes, absolutely, no pun intended. So thank you very much. I appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you, Kevin. I appreciate you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Disruption Lab podcast, brought to you by the Keystone Innovation District and recorded live at Keystone Sessions. I am your host, Kevin McGinnis, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Be sure to tune in next Thursday for more insights from entrepreneurs, innovators, and industry disruptors. Until then, keep challenging the norm and making waves.